right. Well, welcome everybody to the DevLake End-of-Year-Meetup. Can't believe it's already December and the year has flown by with so much great stuff for us to celebrate, all of which we are so indebted and grateful to for our incredible community that has grown so much over this year. And we'll be sharing some of those highlights in just a second to really highlight just how far DevLake has come in pushing dev data, DORA, and everything in between forward this year. So let's jump to the next slide and I'll tell you what we're going to cover today. So first, we'll do a quick welcome. We'll talk about some of the updates. Like I said, lots to really celebrate and share. Really proud to talk through those in just a second. Then, of course, we've got the main event, what I imagine all of you guys are tuning in for today, and hopefully all of you jumping into the recording on YouTube will thoroughly enjoy, which is a discussion with our friend Nathen Harvey, diving into the DORA report from this year. Lots to discuss and cover there, and that interview will be led with Henry, and I'm really looking forward to listening into that one. Once we've done that, we'll open up the floor for Q&A and discussion. Any questions you have, feel free to either use the Q&A function here in Zoom or just drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring those and we'll cover as much as we can. So certainly be sure to dive in there. So let's jump to the next slide and show what we've got to celebrate here. So community highlights. Really can't believe how much has happened this year. We're rapidly approaching 1,000 active developers in the Slack community. Really an unbelievable milestone. By my count, we have coverage in over 35 countries now, so truly a global community. And I want to give a special shout out to everybody who is involved in answering questions, in asking good questions, in resolving bugs, creating GitHub issues, PRs, everything in between, right? The power of DevLake is constantly increasing, and that's all thanks to you guys. We're approaching 800,000 Dockerhub pulls, which I think is really quite exciting. Surely we'll have to celebrate and pull together when we cross that exciting million mark, which who knows, might happen as early as end of January, I think. We're also now really happy to say that we're a true open source project with contributions from over 123 individuals now. So thank you to everybody who's created and got a PR into production. Big or small, doesn't matter, makes a huge difference. And if you're looking to create a PR, you want to contribute to the project, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be happy to give you a good first issue to dive into. We'll be happy to help you with a new idea, a new PR. The whole team, the whole community is here to help, so don't be bashful. We're also proud to say that DevLake is now being used by well over 500 different companies around the world, which I think is just really, really exciting. We've got companies larger than 800,000 full-time employees. We've got small startups with 10 people finding interesting ways to use this and everything in between. So truly DevLake is becoming a global movement, and we're so happy about that. Our star count, obviously something we care about, but not super important. If you haven't started the repo, be sure to. It certainly makes us feel good. So it's another kind of milestone to cover. But I think it's so cool to see that the growth has been happening in such a big way, even if the star count doesn't necessarily tell that full story, right? So really, thank you to all of you who've been a big part of all of this growth. So exciting to see, and I can't wait to hopefully see these numbers double or even triple by this time next year. And I think with your help, we'll certainly do it. So let's jump to the next slide. I want to give a couple of key kind of shout outs here. I'm not going to cover all of the names, but we've had some unbelievably great new contributors dive in this year. Many of them are featured on this slide. If you see your name and face there, thank you so much. And for those of you who might be missing from this, thank you as well. And if you want to get your face on one of these slides in the future, let us know and we'll help you make a contribution. The next slide will also cover some of our community champions. Thank you to every single person that's on this slide. So much to be proud of for all of these people, whether they're answering questions, helping users out, debugging things with us. It makes a gigantic difference. So thank you to every single one of you on here. And certainly thank you to all of you tuning in. So let's jump to the next slide, and we will get started with the final piece of the update. We'll share some of this in the Slack so that you can review it in more detail, dig into the specific releases, and learn more about the details. But lots of really big improvements that have happened this year, from the integration of important data sources to the support of new frameworks to really important UX and UI improvements. All of this comes from your guys' feedback, so keep it coming, and we'll continue to do our very best to keep improving DevLake for all of you. So let's jump into what is the main event, and I'll pass the mic off here to my good friend, my collaborator, Henry, the creator of DevLake and my longtime collaborator for 5 years now. And I'll mute myself, and he can get this introduced and introduce our friend and star of the show, Nathen. Thanks both of you guys for joining.
Thank you so much, Maxim. And as we move into the highlight of our end-of-year community meetup, I'm thrilled to announce our guest, Nathen Harvey, the head of Google's DORA team. And having Nathen back is fantastic. He was with us at the beginning of this year, sharing insights from last year's report, which makes Nathen the perfect person to help us close out this year with a deep dive into the 2023 State of DevOps report. And a bit more background for our new members here, Nathen's journey with DORA is nothing short of remarkable. So almost a decade ago, Nathen was among the first batch of industry professionals to participate in DORA survey. And fast forward to today, he's not just a participant, but a pivotal force on the DORA team, crafting those very surveys and authoring the annual DORA report. So here's what to expect. So Nathen will kick things off by giving us an overview of this year's report. And then we'll follow that up by diving into some selected topics to get a richer understanding. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, definitely post that into the webinar's Q&A feature. So without further ado, let's extend a warm welcome to Nathen.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really exciting for me to be here. And thank you to the entire DevLake community for bringing DORA to so many different organizations, more than 500 organizations. I mean, it boggles the mind. And the thing that brings me so much joy is that, look, we have these DORA metrics to really help us drive conversations. And so when you think about all of the conversations that are happening across those 500 plus organizations about how we can help each other improve the lives of technology workers everywhere around the world, that's really, really awesome stuff. Henry, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen. I have a couple of slides here that we can walk through just to help us get kicked off. Awesome.
Yes, please.
Thanks for that. All right. Great. And let's see. Here we go. You should now see my slides. Yeah, great. Awesome. So, wow, 500 different organizations. That number is going to stick with me, I think, for a minute here. I think it's super awesome. But, I don't know what 500 organizations they are, but I do know that it probably doesn't matter what industry they're in or the size of those organizations. I believe it's safe to say that those organizations are all technology-driven organizations that use technology to drive their business forward and use technology so that they can focus on creating great experiences for their customers. Because technology truly is the thing that enables those great experiences. But in every one of those organizations, I think there's this big open question. How can we get the most value out of delivering technology? How do we get an optimized value delivery from investment in technology and in technologists? It's about us too. It's not just about the technology. So how can you get there? How can we help them get there? Well, one of the things that every organization is going to need is a way to assess how they're doing today. They'll need to identify areas to invest and make improvements. And they're going to need a feedback loop that will help them understand exactly how they're progressing. And by the way, we're going to need to build the organizational muscles required to repeat this over time. So we've got these organizational muscles, this institutional culture about getting better at getting better. This is where DORA can truly help. So hello, DORA. Now, I don't have to introduce DORA to the DevLake community. You know it well. DORA is DevOps research and assessment. You know what? Every time I say that, a little piece inside of me kind of dies a little bit, honestly. And it has to do with that word DevOps. I worry about that word DevOps because I think, look, there are many in our community who find that word, and it's a solid banner for us to get behind. We understand what it means. But there are so many others around the world who have moved on. DevOps is dead. DevOps is the thing we tried, it didn't work, we're on to the next thing. So maybe DORA isn't so much about DevOps. Maybe it's really about improving the lives of technology-driven teams. And it probably doesn't matter whether you call your team a DevOps team or a platform engineering team or an SRE team or a software engineering team or any other name. DORA is really about how you and your teams can get better at getting better. So, hello, everyone. My name is Nathen Harvey. Henry, Maxim, thank you for the invitation to come back and meet again with the DevLake community. I had so much fun last time I was here at the beginning of the year. It's hard to believe that a year has gone by, but in fact, of course, it has. If you are meeting me for the first time, I'm very happy to get to know you. Unfortunately, we're not in person, but that's okay. This media allows us to connect globally, which is super important. But we're not here to talk about me today. We're here to talk about what's new in the annual DORA report. And so before we go any further, it's important that you know how to get the report. I hope that many of you have already had a chance to read it. But if not, head over to dora.dev/report or pull out your phone or whatever, scan that QR code, and you can go and download the report today. While you do that and have a chance to read it, I'll just sit here quietly and wait. No, of course I'm not going to do that. You're not going to read the report right now, but I do want to make sure that you have it. Speaking of this report, it's always a good reminder to remember how this DORA survey and how we come about this report. How do we build the report? It starts with a survey. And this year, we're really happy to say that we saw participation from around the world. In fact, when you look at 2022 and compare it to 2023 this year, we saw a more than 300% increase in the number of participants in this year's survey. And that is huge. And it is thanks, at least in part, to the DevLake community. We know that you and people that you've talked to completed the survey. Actually, we don't know who completed the survey. It's a completely anonymous survey. But we're going to assume that you and people that you talked to completed the survey this year. The respondents that we had in our survey this year, relative to last year, were generally more experienced. They generally came from larger organizations as well. But the important thing is that with more data, with more responses to our survey, we can do a much deeper analysis of the relationships between ways of working or the capabilities that a team has and the outcomes or the meaningful accomplishments that are relevant across each individual's organization and relevant to the people, you and I, that are living and working in those organizations. And of course, our hope is that these insights will give leaders and, more importantly, practitioners a sense of where and how they can make an impact. What can we do? So, what did we learn this year? What were some of the key insights? Some of these are going to look very familiar to you if you've read previous DORA reports. Some of them are brand new. That's kind of how our research works. There are things that we look at consistently year in and year out. One of those good things is those 4 software delivery performance metrics. So how do we measure software delivery performance? Well, with DevLake, of course. We want to look at those things like your deployment frequency, your change lead time, your time to restore service, and your change failure recovery time. And your change fail rate. Sorry, that was one of them as well. But we also look at new things each year. So some of my favorite findings from this year's research. First and foremost, and this is one, again, that we've repeated year in and year out, is around a healthy culture. It really doesn't matter what technology you're using, the processes you have in place, the capabilities you have as a team. You're not going to get far if your culture isn't healthy. We, year in and year out, see teams that have performance-oriented cultures, where collaboration and working together is rewarded, where we learn from incidents. When something fails, we use that as an opportunity to learn. These cultures, organizations with these cultures, have the best performance. A new thing that we looked at this year is how user-centric is your team. Look, we've all heard of the software factory, and we just need to pump out more software, just push more bits down the assembly line. That's fine, except maybe you've forgotten who your users are. As a software engineer, the way that you bring value to your organization is by writing code and getting that code delivered out to your users. But it has to be code that matters to your users. It has to be connected to the things that your users are trying to accomplish, your customers. So as a software engineer, do you know what your customers are doing? Maybe a different question. When was the last time you experienced your product as a user, as a customer of your product? This idea of user centricity is really powerful. We see organizations where teams are highly focused on those users and the needs of their users. They have much better software delivery performance metrics, but more importantly, they have much better organizational metrics. Things like, profitability, market share, customer satisfaction. User centricity drives a lot of that. Quality documentation, another interesting finding. This is the third year that we've looked into documentation. And when we talk about documentation, we're really talking about internal documentation. We're engineers working together, building a product or service. We're not talking about the end user documentation for that product or service, but rather the documentation that you and I rely on to build, to run, to deliver, to ship that application. Internal documentation. And what we found was that quality documentation leads to favorable outcomes, better operational performance, better organizational performance. But this also leads to the establishment of those good technical capabilities. Technical capabilities that we look at, things like continuous integration, test automation. When we have good documentation in place, it creates a ground for those technical capabilities to thrive. But it goes beyond that. Not only does it allow you to have those technical capabilities, but it means when you have good documentation and those technical capabilities in place, the technical capabilities drive even more great organizational outcomes. Next up, we looked at flexible infrastructure. And creating a flexible infrastructure is really a powerful way for you and your team to drive those software delivery performance outcomes that you're looking for. Cloud, using the cloud, is one of the things that really enables or unlocks flexible infrastructure. But similar to previous years, what we found is that simply using the cloud is not enough. It's how you use the cloud, not just that you're using the cloud. Next, and this is a reflection of the healthy culture, we looked into people who identify as underrepresented. So those people who identified as women or who self-described their gender, and people who said, hey, I'm underrepresented when it comes to my peers, with my local community. These folks tend to have higher levels of burnout. And burnout there's no one singular cause for burnout. But we do see some things at play here. Some of these folks who identify as underrepresented tend to take on more toilsome work or maybe are asked to do less recognized work that maybe is non-promotable work. The work that has to get done it has to get done to keep everything running smoothly. But no one is going to come at the end of the year and promote you for having done that work that holds things together. I think the most important thing that we can all reflect on here, I mean, look, I am a middle-aged white dude. I am not someone who identifies as underrepresented, but I care about the experience of everyone around me. And so when I see findings like this, I take this to heart and I ask deep questions. How is work being distributed across my team? Is everyone being given an opportunity to shine? Or are we just giving the less meaningful work to a certain group or a certain few individuals on our team? There's a real opportunity for all of us as an industry to improve. But the way that we start as an industry to improve is we start with ourselves and with our local team. So I encourage you to look at that. The final finding that I want to cover off on really quickly here is this one around code review speed. And this was a new thing that we looked at specifically this year because as we go out into the world and talk with many, many different teams, we see this as a regular, repeated pattern. An engineer writes some code. That code has to be reviewed by another engineer because that's what the policy says within an organization. That's how we do work. It turns out that sometimes these code reviews from one engineer to the next can take a long time. And what we found when we dug into this was that teams with faster code reviews had about a 50% better software delivery performance overall. 50% better software delivery performance. It's a mind-blowing number. It really startles me. But there's another thing that I find really interesting about this. If you're on a team and today what you have is fast code reviews, maybe speeding them up isn't going to help. But if you have slow code reviews, there might be a really interesting way for you to start fixing those. The other thing I like about this is, as you know, DORA looks at technical capabilities and process capabilities and cultural capabilities. Wow. Talk about hitting all three of those. Code review process, technical capabilities. What tools do you have in place to speed up, to automate, to enable faster code reviews? Process. How do you determine who does the code reviews? Are you distributing the work evenly? Culture. Who's doing the reviews? And what sort of lens do they look at? Do I review Maxim's code contributions different than Henry's? Should I? These are all really interesting questions, and I really think that this is kind of the crux. This is one of the areas where everything kind of comes together, and we have this holistic view of what's happening within our organizations. Now, look, there are certainly lots more insights throughout the entire report. I'd love to read the whole thing to you right now, but I'd love even more to have a conversation with Henry and to answer the questions that you have. So just before we get to that, I want to leave you with a couple of quick closing thoughts here. The first is a reminder that, look, you're not alone. And that's good because the truth is you probably can't improve a whole lot just on your own. We're all in this together. I love seeing that there are more than 900 community members, almost 1,000 community members here in the DevLake community. That's super exciting to see. And we all have each other to lean on and to support and to learn from. On the DORA research side, we have a similar community. So we have a community as well. And of course, there's nothing that says you can only be part of one community. I would strongly encourage you to come over to the DORA community. DORA.community is where practitioners and leaders and researchers are all coming together, talking about how do we put this into practice, this research into practice. It's an excellent forum for sharing. So I would definitely encourage you to join. And then one other thing, it's kind of incredible. We've made it about a half an hour. I don't think anyone's mentioned AI yet. Certainly not generative AI, not that I heard. How about some generative AI? Well, we've been doing some experiments over on DORA. We launched this thing just recently called Ask DORA. This is a generative AI app that we've built. You can have a conversation with the DORA research, the whole body of the DORA research. You can go over to ask-dora.web.app. Super easy name to remember. It's the Ask DORA website, but you can go there and ask things like, how can I measure developer happiness? And the Ask DORA bot will, well, it'll give you the answers of what we've found in our research over the years. Speaking of the years, we've been doing this research for about a decade now. In fact, in 2024, we will release the 10th DORA report, including or making accommodations, I should say, for the fact that we didn't put out a DORA report in 2020 because, well, 2020. Yeah, let's not talk about 2020 anymore. Let's move on. So what I'd really love to know, and I'm gonna stop sharing my slides, and Henry and I are gonna have a conversation here, is what questions do you have? Given what I've looked over and or what you've read, what surprised you most about the research this year? With that, I think I'll stop sharing my slides, and Henry, I might pop back into sharing if I have some websites or something that I want to share, but I'm going to turn things back over to you.
Wow. Thank you so much. I gotta say that hearing your presentation is a much more enjoyable process than reading the report myself. Can we have you have something like, DORA report read by Nathen Harvey every year? Can we make that happen?
I think, it's one of those things where I kind of have two thoughts about that, Henry. So first, I don't want to listen to myself for 95 pages of a report. So maybe not me reading it, but maybe I could get a couple of different people and we could, it could be kind of a group reading, if you will. And then my second thought is, wow, that sounds like it's going to take a long time also. It would be super accessible, though, if it were spoken word as opposed to words that you had to read. I mean, think about it. You could listen to the DORA report while you're on your commute. So then maybe my next question is, maybe this is a place where AI could come back in and help us. Could I feed a PDF to the bots and they could come back and give me a really nice audio file? So maybe stay tuned. Maybe, in this end of year lull, maybe I'll do some experimentation there.
Awesome. So since we have been, mentioning this, key topic that's on everyone's mind this year in 2023, AI. So I know DORA covers AI this year. So what are some interesting or surprising findings from, DORA's research on AI's impact on software engineering?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Henry. And it is super fascinating what's happening. And I just want to kind of walk through the process, right? At the beginning of the year-ish, we sit down and come up with some hypotheses around what capabilities might be driving these outcomes. This is what the research team does, and we try to figure out how do we assess those capabilities and ask the right questions. In a surprise to no one, at the beginning of 2023, we said, well, there's this AI thing that's like exploding right now. We should figure out how to learn about that. Of course, we'd never investigated AI specifically before. In fact, all of our research has been sort of program and platform agnostic. And looking at AI as a technology, of course, we're looking not at a specific platform, but again, keeping it agnostic. But as researchers, we didn't really have a whole lot of experience with AI either. So we weren't really sure how to get the best questions. I think we'll do better in 2024. But what we did ask was, hey, we basically put in front of our survey respondents this statement that said, hey, to what extent is the role of AI important to this list of tasks? And we gave the respondents a list of tasks. Tasks like generating code, writing tests, analyzing logs, writing documentation, prioritizing work, etc. There's, I don't know, 30 or so different things that we looked at. And respondents could say it's either not at all important or it's extremely important. And basically what we saw was about half of the respondents, or just over half, said that there was at least some importance that AI was taking in that work that they were doing. So that's cool. We're starting to see AI, get some traction. Again, no surprise. I think it's also important to remember that, the survey opens towards the beginning of the year. It closes around the middle of the year. Here we are at the end of the year. I don't know about you, Henry, but it feels like a lot has happened in the AI world in the last 6 months. So even whatever we reported is, it's a little bit, it is the state of DevOps at that point in time, right? So I think things continue to evolve. But what did we find? So we found basically two things. One, Those teams that are using artificial intelligence and say it has some importance in the work that they're doing, we saw that the well-being of the people on those teams increased. What is well-being? It's like, productivity, decrease in burnout, increase in job satisfaction. This makes a ton of sense. Look, if you're a team and you get to play with the new toys, the new tools, artificial intelligence is one of those new things. And maybe as a team, we have the autonomy to select which tools we get to experiment with and use on our team. There's a good culture piece there. So we expect it, or it's maybe not so surprising to see it drive that employee well-being. On the other hand, what we didn't see was AI actually flowing through to improve organizational performance or delivery performance or operational performance. We suspect it's just not yet. Not yet. And this is because I think teams are experimenting. They're just getting started. It's going to take some time for these tools to come into widespread use. But then I also think back to that whole code review thing. Boy, if you're a team and you need to experiment with some AI and build up some trust and some experience with how to use AI, and DORA tells us that code review speed has a tremendous impact on our software delivery performance, and our code review speed is slow, oh, maybe I don't trust the bots to write the code for me yet, but maybe they can help me speed up the reviews. How might they do that? Well, we know that one way to improve software delivery performance is to ship in smaller batches. Can AI take a big commit and break it down into smaller chunks that could be deployed iteratively? AI can certainly help us write better comments in our code, maybe write documentation. What about Git commit messages? Maybe those could be improved by AI. And that would give the reviewer a little bit more confidence in what they're looking at and some trust in what's happening. I've seen many teams starting to use AI to write unit tests. So now I can have additional tests built in from the AI. Wow. I mean, the things that we can imagine are endless. And I bet you have more than one question, so I think I'll stop there.
Awesome. This is fascinating. So what I'm hearing you saying is we're seeing AI improving people's life, but we're not yet seeing AI contributing to the key organizational performance yet. Am I thinking about this right? That AI is maybe taking care of some of the tedious, repetitive work, and that's how people feels happier with AI's help?
It absolutely could be. It absolutely could be. I think it's a good place for AI to start, for sure. Um, I I don't know that we've seen like strong evidence if that's exactly where AI is being used. We do see kind of broad-based use cases for it. But I would absolutely encourage, look, there are things that humans are good at and there are things that computers are good at. We're both getting better at different sets of things over time, but let the computers do the thing that they're best at. And with artificial intelligence, that probably means we can eliminate some of the toilsome work that you and I have to do.
Awesome. And then you also mentioned code review might be a great place to start applying AI to software engineering. And do you have any data points on, how much speed up can we get and how much improvement can we get by applying AI to code review?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is nope. I don't. I don't have any data points yet because it's not really a thing that we've deeply investigated. I mean, I'm trying to learn and hear from teams, and this is where again the community really matters because we can learn from one another. Probably we'll ask some questions along those lines in 2024, so we can start to have a better answer there.
Fantastic. And with that, I want to segue back into the four keys, because four keys
Yes.
is really at the heart of many of our community members. They come to DevLake to get the four keys, get them benchmarked, and keep improving on them. And this year, I noticed that there's a significant change to the four keys, replacing MTTR with a new metric. Could you please
Yes.
unpack that and help us better understand what prompted that decision, and then what's the new metric?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move back over here. Let me just share my screen. Except I'm gonna Let me just jump back here. So I just want to show you where I'm going so that you can follow along if you'd like. I'm at Dora.dev. I'm going to go to the research page from here, and then I'm going to look at the 2023 research. And then in particular, there's a questions tab which lists all of the questions from the survey that we asked in 2023. If you look at previous years, you'll find the questions there as well. But if I scroll down, we can find the questions here on software delivery performance. Let me zoom in there a little bit so that we can see them a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so this year we changed 2 metrics. 2 we left the same, 2 we changed. Deployment frequency, change lead time, we made no changes to those. But the things that we did change, one is the change fail rate. And actually, we didn't change the question there. The question has always been, what percentage of changes to production or release to users result in degraded service, for example, lead to service impairment or a service outage, and subsequently require remediation. You need a hot fix or a fix forward or something like this. And typically we talk about a change failure as being something that it broke and you can't wait till the next release. You got to fix it now. The thing that we changed here is subtle in the way that we allowed respondents to answer the question. In previous years, we gave you buckets. Your change fail percentage could be 0 to 15. It could be 16 to 31 or 16 to 30. I don't remember exactly what the buckets were, but you get my point. This year, we gave respondents an opportunity to answer in any whole percentage. So it could be 1%, 2%, 3%, 64%. What we saw was that the best performers were coming in around that 5% mark, and the worst performers were coming in around the 64% mark. So there's a huge difference across those when we look across teams. There's some statistical reasoning why this is a much better way to measure this, but I think also it just helps us get a little bit more clarity on how teams are doing. I also think if you go back, a decade or so, maybe we didn't have as good insights as a team into exactly where we were performing. So that's one thing that we changed. The other thing that we changed that you called out there was the MTTR, or the time to restore service. Now, there's a couple of reasons we changed this. First, it has to do with that M. We're always talking about time to restore service. People always want to throw in an M. And then we get into arguments around, is that M the mean or the median? Which one is it, Henry? And wait, what's the difference between mean and median? Look, let's not have that discussion. And of course, we all know the difference between mean and median. Or maybe we don't. It doesn't matter. But then here's the other challenge with that time to restore service. We asked that question, when there was an incident, how long did it take for you to recover? Well, we're trying to measure software delivery performance. Incidents of all types and flavors happen. If your cloud provider has a significant outage, if your data center, gets struck by a meteor and gets blown up, how long is it going to take you to recover from that? Well, it's probably a different answer than you shipped a bad configuration file. How long is it going to take you to recover from that? So we've moved away from the time to restore service as a general concept and really focused it in on the idea of software delivery. And so we now call this the, what do we call it? The failed deployment recovery time. So when I ship something that must be remediated, must be fixed right now, we can't wait till the next release. How long does it take me to actually fix that? And you can see there that we asked the question, it's the first one there. How long does it generally take to restore service after a change to production or release to users results in degraded service? It's that after a change to production that was newly introduced in the question. And in fact, in 2023, we asked the question the old way and the new way, just so that we could see, is there a statistical difference? Does the data actually bear out? And there was a big difference. And this one around those those failed deployments, loaded much better, which is kind of, one of those data analyst terms. It means that it worked better with the full set of metrics. There's a little bit more explanation in the appendix of this year's report. I would definitely encourage you to head over there to read that.
Fantastic. And I think this really helps clarify the MTTR metric, because we got so many questions from our users, what counts as an incident?
Yes.
Yeah, so that really clarifies, incident in this sense, I think it's more of, like a deployment to production that fails and needs immediate remediation.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, look, we probably ship bugs to production all the time. Not every bug requires immediate attention, right? Maybe and maybe we don't know about it for also. So we don't want to necessarily count those because we are really trying to look at that software delivery performance.
Awesome. So after engineering team gathers initial metrics with the DORA framework using software like DevLake, they got the 4 keys. A common question that we have from our users is, what's next? How can I use these 4 keys and the metrics to fuel our improvement efforts? So do you have any recommendation on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think this is where it's a good reminder, and I'll just go back to Dora.dev here, and I'm just going to go back to this research page. It's a good reminder here that, look, these 4 keys are kind of in the middle of the entire research program. What we know is that these 4 keys can drive better well-being for our teams and better organizational performance. But the real question is, now that I have them, now that I know where I am, how well I'm performing, or how poorly I'm performing, the next question is, what do I do? Well, presumably, you want to improve those measures. So how do you improve those measures? Now we have to look to the left on this diagram, at least, to the left of those measures and look at the capabilities. And we look at capabilities like, I don't know, we mentioned this one earlier, continuous integration, or we look at things like streamlining your change approval process, or cultural capabilities, like do you have a generative or performance-oriented culture? We look at things like documentation. So now, with these 4 metrics in place, we can start to have a conversation with our engineering team. Hey, what is holding you back? Where's the constraint in your system? And maybe what we'll start to do is uncover where those bottlenecks are, because then we can start to improve them. So let's just take continuous integration as an example. From the Dora.dev site, we could say, hey, continuous integration, I don't think we're doing that, or maybe we're not doing it right, or maybe when I say those words, it means something different than when you do. Well, we can go to Dora.dev. We can read about what is continuous integration. How can you go about implementing it? What are some of the objections and pitfalls you might run into? And then how can you measure it? So now as an engineering team, I can say, hey, look, my DORA numbers aren't where I want them to be. I want them to improve. I know that continuous integration is a bottleneck. Let me set some short-term goals. I'm going to set a short-term goal that code commits trigger a build of the software. Maybe I ask myself that question. How frequently is a code commit triggering a build of the software? If you have daily builds, maybe we can say, hey, you know what? I want to get this quarter, I want to get to a place where 90% of a code commit results in a build of our software, or 50% or 80%. I don't know what that number is, but let's improve that number. Instead of being once a day, we're going to build more frequently. Now we can do that, see how it impacts those 4 metrics. Because what the research shows us is that continuous integration is predictive of better software delivery performance metrics. And that's really how you can read this sort of research chart.
I think this core model diagram has to be my favorite part of the report. And if you haven't already explored the report, I highly recommend you diving into it, because the report actually, unpacks the dynamics between different kind of entities, like the organizational performance, the technical capabilities, and really shows how they interact with each other, and really help us get a better understanding of how we can, improve one part and leads to the cascading improvements of the different components of this entire SDLC. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Henry, so the research that we were just looking at, that model is sort of this, we call it the DORA core model. It's the most sort of prescient findings over the decade of research. If you go back to the 2023 page, you can find these are technically, they're called structural equation models. These are the models that show that predictive nature. These are all in the report, but we also make them available here on the website. So you can see how the technical capabilities interact with things, how documentation interacts with other outcomes and other capabilities. So in fact, in this year's report, we have, I don't know, there's at least one model per chapter, it seems, of the report. So there's a lot that you can find there.
Awesome. So before we transition to our Q&A session, is there any final thoughts or things you want our listeners to remember?
Yeah, I think look, the importance of those 4 key metrics is to ground you in a place where you can start having a conversation. So it is really important. You can almost liken it, Henry, to a journey of being a healthy human, right? Maybe one of the indicators for how's your health is how much do you weigh, your blood pressure, things along these lines. These are indicators, but you don't get lighter by thinking about your weight every day. I wake up every morning, I get on the scale. I wake up tomorrow, I get on the scale. It's not getting better. Why not? Well, let's have that conversation. Why aren't your measures getting better? Why are they starting to slip? Or why are they improving? Let's use those key metrics to drive conversations. And then I think the other thing that's super important to remember in those conversations is those conversations don't happen in a mirror. It's not just me talking to myself. They probably don't even happen on my local team. There are others within the organization that we need to bring into this conversation. Who are some of those others? It might be our product owners. It might be security professionals. It might be quality assurance engineers. It might be our compliance team. It might be sales and marketing that we need to bring into these discussions. Again, when we go back to that finding around user centricity and staying focused on the user, are you close to your user? And maybe as an engineer, if I could encourage you to do one thing as an engineer, get as close as you can to that user. Whether that means you use your product as if you were a new user, or you literally go sit with a user on your product and to observe how they're using it. I will warn you though, sometimes when you go watch someone use the product that you've built, they're going to use it in ways that you haven't imagined. And you're going to be tempted to tell them, no, 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 not like that, like this, because that's how I design. No, they're right. They're right. And it's your job to learn from them. So there you go. I don't know. I think that was 7 key thoughts to leave you with, Henry. I'm sorry for that, but there you go.
I love that. I think what you're saying is these metrics, they're food for thought, right? Like the exact values of the metrics don't matter. Whether you are in the elite tier don't matter, but it's very important that you have a conversation with your team and really understand what those metrics means for you guys.
Absolutely.
Okay. So with that, thank you so much, Nathan. And then we'll start taking questions from our audience. So if you have any questions, post them in the Q&A sessions of this webinar. And then Nathan will pick questions from there. And many thanks to all of our attendees who are sticking to the end of this with us. Awesome.
Yeah, this was a really great discussion. Thanks, Nathan, for diving so deep in all of this. And Henry, awesome interview. And I think if there's anything I would want to emphasize that was discussed in great detail in this, it's really just having those conversations with yourself and with your team about figuring out, like, how do you take these indicators and turn them into good context? Like, how do you use those to ask the right questions of yourself and of your team? And then how can you start mapping those to like a nice scientific approach to targeting your goals, right? I always like to say that, and I'll say it 100 times on 100 sessions. It's like the metrics are never going to be the solutions, right? I love that analogy you used, Nathan, about assessing your weight, right? I can buy the most high-tech scale in the entire world. I can stand on it 17 times a day, and if I'm not translating that insight into saying like, hey, I need to maybe clean up my diet, I need to go for a couple more walks in the week to, keep myself in a better shape. Like those metrics aren't going to do anything by themselves. It's all about the action. And I think with that spirit in mind, always be thinking about that. Like, how can you hold yourself to account to do better things and take more action to get those results? And as a call to action for our DevLake community, if you ever think of something that you feel like is uniquely actionable, or you found like, hey, like we started paying attention to this, and here's the step we took to turn an insight into action, and that action into results, definitely share it with us, because we'd love to bring that to more people. It's something we really enjoy digging up with all of the different companies using it, is figuring out like, awesome, you've got this gorgeous dashboard, you've got great data. What did you do with it, right? And the what did you do with it conversations are always the most impactful. So Nathen, I so appreciate your perspective on kind of tying this all together and keeping it nice and actionable.
Absolutely. And if I can just carry that a little bit further, look, sometimes the reason we don't get better is because we know it's going to be hard and maybe even impossible. So maybe, and we're at the time of year where this maybe works really well. New Year's resolutions are a thing. Maybe you can make a New Year's resolution with your team to, on a regular basis, answer this question: what if it was easy? And maybe take a small change. Think about the smallest change you could make for your application. Okay, sorry, that's too big. Think of a smaller one. What is the tiniest change that you could make? How quickly can you get that from code committed into the hands of your users? And maybe as a team, a cross-functional team, you can commit to doing this on a quarterly basis so that you can demonstrate that, hey, if what I'm doing is changing the word happy to glad in the UI, I can get that through in this amount of time. Now, let's just expand that a little bit further, and let's run these sort of tests, if you will, of our system. If we need to move fast, what does that look like? And if you do that, maybe that will inspire you to want to live like that more frequently, more than just once a quarter when we run this test. And it will unlock some ideas about how you can get there.
Yeah, I love that. And you bring up a really great kind of closing thought there, which we always love to talk about, which is like the practice of this stuff is it's as cheesy as it sounds, right? It really is a journey, not a destination, and it's a practice, not a single outcome. And one of the best ways that you can get yourself and your team on that practice and on that journey and build that momentum is to start small, right? Like start building some small victories. Like even if your grand vision is like, hey, we want to make our code quality twice as good, and we want to reduce our downtime by 80%, right? Like some big bold goals, right? Those are scary for anybody. They're probably impossible in many cases to get done in one go. But if you start small and start saying like, okay, we want to deliver our fixes faster, well, what's holding them back? Like, oh, we're taking a whole bunch of time to review PRs. Like, oh, why is that? The PRs are huge and they take a long time to review. So let's look at PR size, let's look at review time, let's figure out how as a team we can maybe get those PRs down by 20% in overall size, make them a little more easy. Let's figure out how we can prioritize people's schedules so they can take 2 days a week where they have a dedicated block of time to review those things. Bam, all of a sudden you're seeing the results, you've got some good dopamine hits, you're feeling good, on to the next challenge. And I think that's such an important takeaway, is like, when in doubt, start small, map them to things that are frustrating and painful for you and your team. And I guarantee if you do that, it's going to be so easy to start making those even bigger changes. And lo and behold, a year and a half later, you might find like, hey, we're really doing extremely well, and we are in a totally different universe than we were when we began.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of it is about taking baby steps and breaking down, daunting milestones into smaller achievable steps.
Awesome. Well, I know we are right on the hour here, so I guess parting thoughts. I'll pass a question to all four of us. Um, what are your plans for the holidays? Let's close it out with something fun. Doing anything fun? Taking time off, and any New Year's resolutions for you guys?
I think from my perspective, I'm going to take a little bit of downtime, certainly spend some time with my family, which I'm very much looking forward to, and not traveling, which I'm also pretty much looking forward to. So it'll be good to, be at home for a minute and surrounded by family and loved ones.
Fantastic. How
Same
about
for
you,
me.
Henry?
I'm traveling back to Asia to see my family, and hopefully get recharged and then come back fully refreshed for New Year.
Great. Same here. And, trying to make some sweets and goodies for, I have a plan to distribute for less privileged people around my area for the Christmas. Yeah, that's it. And I guess we have a question in the
Oh.
chats. Maybe if we can have a look. Yeah.
Yeah, let's grab that before we sign off. So thank you for the anonymous question. So I'll read it out loud, and we'll see if Henry and Nathan can tackle it as a closeout here. So our attendee here says, as a large organization with diverse teams and development methodologies, how can we implement DORA metrics enterprise-wide? We have flexibility in tools and processes, so standardization is difficult. That's something we do see quite a bit. What are best practices for driving organizational alignment on delivery and operational metrics using the DORA framework, even across teams not using Agile? I'm especially interested in change management advice from others who have enabled this level of transformation before. So this is a really, really good question. I think it boils down to, you got a large company, teams are configured differently. They have different practices, different schedules. Maybe they're using different tools. Nathan and Henry, how do we do this?
Yeah, my quick take is it's not easy, and maybe it's not even worth it. And the reason I say that is, look, when we run our survey, even we're asking you for the primary application or service that you work on. How frequently are you deploying? What is your change lead time, etc. These are really measures that are meant at the application or service level. When you start to aggregate them, you kind of lose all of the context specificity for each one of those applications or services. So if you want to roll something up and aggregate it, my advice is to look at the change in those numbers over time, sort of a second order. I want to see, and I want to reward the teams that are improving their DORA metrics the most, not the teams that are getting the highest score, but realizing the highest improvement. I think that is a much better way to look at across the entire organization.
I think that's really well said, and the input I would give to answer that question, and thank you for the question too, because it's a good one, is I think, as basic as it might sound, that challenge is also a challenge of communication and a challenge of culture, where I think one of the things you really have to establish is that the results of those metrics are going to naturally be different for each team, and that can be a good thing, right? And the idea of, like, one of the ways I've seen DORA in particular mishandled by so many larger companies is like, hey, everyone needs to be in the elite category, and you want to push back, right, and make it clear, like, hey, for some teams there might be a very, very good reason why they're only releasing once a week, once a month. There might be a good reason, maybe you've got a team who's managing payment systems, and their number one goal is stability, stability, stability. Nothing else matters. So they might look like they're in low categories for a bunch of things that aren't relevant to that, and they want to and need to be elite in one particular category, and that's great. And similarly, right, you, like, just to illustrate the point, you might have teams who are really tasked with, like, creating great new features in rapid response to customer demands and inputs, and they're collaborating closely with the sales and marketing team. They're kind of putting MVPs out there. They're testing what's working, and as a natural result of that, that stuff might break a lot. So they might see a ton of change failure rate, but maybe that change failure rate is ultimately a great thing because it's indicative of like, hey, we're pumping stuff out really fast. We're getting feedback. If it breaks, it's not damaging to the customer experience and it's pushing the company forward. So I think that's a key answer to that question is make sure that communication is clear that like, hey, we're not just trying to use a single scorecard for everybody and get everybody performing in the exact same way. Different teams have different goals, and making sure everyone is comfortable with understanding that, especially the non-technical, executives who might be looking at this stuff, being able to give people confidence that like, hey, we're not just measuring you to measure you. Like, we're figuring out how to improve, we're figuring out how to stabilize, we're figuring out how to identify victories that maybe we can translate into best practices that we share with other teams. And by the way, like, tell us what you think you should be judged on. I think that's another key piece, right? Is when things go wrong, it's usually because there's been some kind of top-down approach to like, hey, here's how we're assessing success. And what you definitely don't want to do there is make that a one-way conversation. So make it a collaborative process, get people invested in like, how are we doing things? Why are we doing things? What's important to us? What are our pain points? And that's going to go a tremendously long way. And my closing thought on that is I'm glad, whoever asked that question, I'm glad you came to DevLake, because the exact thing you're describing is a big part of why we built this, right? Is many teams are using different tools, different processes. Maybe they're defining certain terms a somewhat unique way based on the context of what they're doing. And as I hope you found, DevLake gives you that capability to connect to all those tools. And if you want to go adjust those queries to account for those differences, that's something that DevLake exists for. And if you need any help with it, don't hesitate to DM us in the Slack, and we'll be more than happy to help you.
Well, thank you, Maxim and Nathan, for answering that question. And before we wrap up today's session, just one last shameless plug for our DevLake developers. We recently launched a SaaS offering of DevLake. This is powered by DevLake, but will provide even superior experience and more enterprise maturity features on top of DevLake. So if you're interested, we're currently in our private beta, so definitely fill out that interest form and we'll get in contact with you. And Nathan, thank you so much again for speaking with us today, sharing insights from the report. Hopefully, we'll have the opportunity to invite you back next year and make this a tradition, for the community. But thank you so much for being us. We learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you all, and enjoy the holidays. And I can't wait to reconnect again in 2024.
Fantastic. Likewise. Well, from all of us at DevLake, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, however you celebrate. We hope it's relaxing. We hope you get to connect with everyone you love. And certainly from us, like, we love all of you guys. Thanks so much for being part of the community. And we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.